Mark Twain's selected works. The facts concerning the recent carnival of crime in Connecticut, June 1876. Part 3. Yes, no doubt, but I am not an ass. I am only the saddle of an ass, but go on. You entertained me more than I like to confess. I'm glad of that. You will not mind my lying a little to keep in practice. Look here, not to be too personal, I think you are about the shabbiest and most contemptible little shriveled-up reptile that can be imagined. I am grateful enough that you are invisible to other people, for I should die with shame to be seen with such a mildewed monkey of a conscience as you are. Now, if you were 5 or 6 feet high, oh, come, who is to blame? I don't know. Why, you are, nobody else. Confound you, I wasn't consulted about your personal appearance. I don't care. You had a good deal to do with it, nevertheless. When you were 8 or 9 years old, I was 7 feet high and as pretty as a picture. I wish you had died young. So you've grown the wrong way, have you? Some of us grow one way and some the other. You had a large conscience once. If you've a small conscience now, I reckon there are reasons for it. However, both of us are to blame, you and I. You see, you used to be conscientious about a great many things, morbidly so I may say. It was a great many years ago. You probably do not remember it now. Well, I took a great interest in my work, and so I enjoyed the anguish which certain pet sins of yours afflicted you with. Then I kept pelting at you until I rather overdid the matter. You began to rebel. Of course, I began to lose ground then and shrivel a little, diminish in stature, get moldy, and grow deformed. The more I weakened, the more stubbornly you fastened on to those particular sins, till at last the places on my person that represent those vices became as callous as shark skin. Take smoking, for instance. I played that card a little too long and I lost. When people played with you at this late day to quit that vice, that old callous place seems to enlarge and cover me all over like a shirt of mail. It exerts a mysterious smothering effect. And presently I, your faithful hater, your devoted conscience, go sound asleep. Sound? It is no name for wonder at such a time. You have some few other vices, perhaps 80 or maybe 90, that affect me in much the same way. This is flattering. You must be asleep a good part of your time. Yes, of late years. I should be asleep all the time, but for the help I get, who helps you? Other consciences. Whenever a person whose conscience I am acquainted with tries to plead with you about the vices you are callous to, I get my friend to give his client a pang concerning some villainy of his own, and that shuts off his meddling and starts him off to hunt personal consolation. My field of usefulness is about trimmed down to tramps, budding authoresses, and that line of goods now. But don't you worry, I'll harry you on them while they last. Just you put your trust in me. I think I can. But if you had only been good enough to mention these facts some 30 years ago, I should have turned my particular attention to sin, and I think that by this time I should not only have had you pretty permanently asleep on the entire list of human vices, but reduced to the size of a homeopathic pill at that. That is about the style of conscience I am pining for. If I only had you shrunk down to a homeopathic pill and could get my hands on you, would I put you in a glass case for a keepsake? No, sir, I would give you to a yellow dog. That is where you ought to be, you and all your tribe. You are not fit to be in society, in my opinion. Now another question. Do you know a good many consciences in this section? Plenty of them. I would give anything to see some of them. Could you bring them here, and would they be visible to me? Certainly not. I suppose I ought to have known that without asking, but no matter. You can describe them. Tell me about my neighbor Thompson's conscience, please. Very well. I know him intimately. I've known him many years. I knew him when he was 11 feet high and of a faultless figure. And he is very rusty and tough and misshapen now. and hardly ever interests himself about anything. As to his present size, well, he sleeps in a cigar box. Likely enough, there are few smaller, meaner men in this region than Hugh Thompson. Do you know Robinson's conscience? Yes. He is a shade under 4.5 feet high, used to be a blonde, is a brunette now, but still shapely and comely. Well, Robinson is a good fellow. Do you know Tom Smith's conscience? I have known him from childhood. He was 13 inches high and rather sluggish when he was 2 years old, as nearly all of us are at that age. He is 37 feet high now and the stateliest figure in America. His legs are still racked with growing pains, but he has a good time nevertheless, never sleeps. He is the most active and energetic member of the New England Conscience Club, is president of it. Night and day you can find him pegging away at Smith, panting with his labor, sleeves rolled up, counting us all alive with enjoyment. He has got his victim splendidly dragooned now. He can make poor Smith imagine that the most innocent little thing he does is an odious sin, and then he sets to work and almost tortures the soul out of him about it. Smith is the noblest man in all this section and the purest, and yet is always breaking his heart because he cannot be good. Only a conscience could find pleasure in heaping agony upon a spirit like that. You know my Aunt Mary's conscience? I have seen her at a distance, but am not acquainted with her. She lives in the open air altogether because no door is large enough to admit her. I can believe that. Let me see. Do you know the conscience of that publisher who once stole some sketches of mine for a series of his, and then left me to pay the law expenses I had to incur in order to choke him off? Yes, he has a wide fame. He was exhibited a month ago with some other antiquities for the benefit of a recent member of the cabinet's conscience that was starving in exile. Tickets and fares were high, but I traveled for nothing by pretending to be the conscience of an editor and got in for half price by representing myself to be the conscience of a clergyman. However, the publisher's conscience, which was to have been the main feature of the entertainment, was a failure as an exhibition. He was there, but what of that? The management had provided a microscope with a magnifying power of only 30,000 diameters, and so nobody got to see him after all. There was great and general dissatisfaction, of course, but just here there was an eager footstep on the stair. I opened the door, and my Aunt Mary burst into the room. It was a joyful meeting, and a cheery bombardment of questions and answers concerning family matters ensued. By and by my aunt said, "But I'm going to abuse you a little now. You promised me the day I saw you last that you would look after the needs of the poor family around the corner as faithfully as I had done it myself. Well, I found out by accident that you failed of your promise. Was that right?" In simple truth, I never had thought of that family a second time, and now such a splintering pang of guilt shot through me. I glanced up at my conscience. Plainly, my heavy heart was affecting him. His body was drooping forward. He seemed about to fall from the bookcase. My aunt continued, "And think how you have neglected my poor protege at the almshouse, you dear, hard-hearted promise-breaker." I blushed scarlet, and my tongue was tied. As the sense of my guilty negligence waxed sharper and stronger, my conscience began to sway heavily back and forth, and when my aunt, after a little pause, said in a grieved tone, "Since you never once went to see her, maybe it will not distress you now to know that that poor child died months ago, utterly friendless and forsaken." My conscience could no longer bear up under the weight of my sufferings, but tumbled headlong from his high perch and struck the floor with a dull, leaden thump. He lay there writhing with pain and quaking with apprehension, but straining every muscle in frantic efforts to get up. In a fever of expectancy, I sprang to the door, locked it, placed my back against it, and bent a watchful gaze upon my struggling master. Already my fingers were itching to begin their murderous work. "Oh, what can be the matter?" exclaimed my aunt. shrinking from me and following with her frightened eyes the direction of mine. My breath was coming in short, quick gasps now, and my excitement was almost uncontrollable. My aunt cried out, "Oh, do not look so. You appall me. Oh, what can the matter be? What is it you see? Why do you stare so? Why do you work your fingers like that?" "Peace, woman," I said in a hoarse whisper. Look elsewhere. Pay no attention to me. It is nothing. I am often this way, and will pass in a moment. It comes from smoking too much." My injured lord was up, wild-eyed with terror, and trying to hobble toward the door. I could hardly breathe, I was so wrought up. My aunt wrung her hands and said, "Oh, I knew how it would be. I knew it would come to this at last. Oh, I implore you to crush out that fatal habit while it may yet be time. You shall not be deaf to my supplication longer." My struggling conscience showed sudden signs of weariness. "Oh, promise me you will throw off this hateful slavery of tobacco." My conscience began to reel drowsily and grope with his hands, enchanting spectacle. "I beg you, I beseech you, I implore you, your reason is deserting you. There's madness in your eye, it flames with frenzy. Oh, hear me, and be saved. See, I plead with you on my very knees." As she sank before me, my conscience reeled again and then drooped languidly to the floor, blinking toward me a last supplication for mercy with heavy eyes. "Oh, promise, or are you lost? Promise and be redeemed. Promise and live." With a long-drawn sigh, my conquered conscience closed his eyes and fell fast asleep. With an exultant shout, I sprang past my aunt, and in an instant I had my lifelong foe by the throat. After so many years of waiting and longing, he was mine at last. I tore him to shreds and fragments. I rent the fragments to bits. I cast the bleeding rubbish into the fire and drew into my nostrils the grateful incense of my burnt offering. At last, and forever, my conscience was dead. I was a free man. I turned upon my poor aunt, who was almost petrified with terror, and shouted, "Out of this with your paupers, your charities, your reforms, your pestilent morals. You behold before you a man whose life conflict is done, whose soul is at peace, a man whose heart is dead to sorrow, dead to suffering, dead to remorse, a man without a conscience. In my joy I spare you, though I could throttle you and never feel a pang. Fly." She fled. Since that day my life is all bliss. Bliss, unalloyed bliss. Nothing in all the world could persuade me to have a conscience again. I settled all my old outstanding scores and began the world anew. I killed 38 persons during the first 2 weeks, all of them on account of ancient grudges. I burned a dwelling that interrupted my view. I swindled a widow and some orphans out of their last cow, which is a very good one, though not thoroughbred, I believe. I have also committed scores of crimes of various kinds, and have enjoyed my work exceedingly, whereas it would formerly have broken my heart and turned my hair gray, I have no doubt. In conclusion, I wish to state by way of advertisement that medical colleges desiring assorted tramps for scientific purposes, either by the gross, by cord measurement, or per ton, will do well to examine the lot in my cellar before purchasing elsewhere, as these were all selected and prepared by myself, and can be had at a low rate, because I wish to clear out my stock and get ready for the spring trade.